Who are sneakers really for? I want to talk about it with you this time on Fire Footwear. Welcome back to Fire Footwear, everybody. As always, I'm your host, Matt Frates, and I hope that this finds you well. I want to apologize for not coming out with an episode last week. Unfortunately, Thursday afternoon, I started feeling a little bit strange, and I had to cancel my son's t-ball practice. I am the coach. I ended up getting food poisoning. First time in my life I've had food poisoning, and I'm going to tell you, 0 out of 10, do not recommend. One of the worst experiences I've ever had being sick. Now, granted, I've not had something catastrophic, but in terms of what I actually experienced, it was pretty damn awful. So be careful what you eat. Be careful of the leftovers that you eat and consume and leave in your refrigerator. Trust me, take my word for it. It was an awful experience. So as I wanted to come back this week with an episode, I was trying to think of what to talk about. And on TikTok, if you're not following me on TikTok, by the way, at Fire Footwear Pod is the place to do that. I end up posting a lot of things when I get to work because I have these thoughts as I'm going into the office, and I like to put them down and I like to post them there and get a little bit of engagement. Something that I think is sorely missing in the sneaker community these days is true engagement. I think a lot of people are either going down the hate train or they're going down the hype train in terms of always placating to an audience. They're always agreeing with content creators that they like in hopes that maybe somebody will give them a platform for 5 seconds or whatever. I feel like we don't have enough discourse. I feel like we don't have enough true discussion just about where sneakers are, topics in the community. And I think it's healthy that we ask each other questions, that we banter back and forth, and that we question each other because not everybody's opinion, that includes mine, nobody's opinion is better than somebody else's. And so I think it's always healthy to be looking at the culture. It's always healthy to be thinking about where we are. And so I was thinking this week about some of the reels that I'd put out on TikTok. And one of them, I think it was 2 weeks ago, I had asked a fundamental question about how runners became so popular. Because when you look at guys and names that are lending their design creations to these runners, Joe Freshgoods, Jeff Staple now, the Brooks GT5. Jeff Staple, the guy who invented and created the Pigeon Dunk, one of the most famous sneakers of all time, is now doing running shoes. Running shoes are huge in the culture. And I've been fascinated by this. And so I asked the question on TikTok where maybe the advent of this was. And somebody put in the comments that Ronnie F had something to do with this. What do they mean by that? They mean Ronnie Feig, of course, of Kith. And I liked the comment. I might have even said most definitely, and it was a passing reply by me. And a week later, 2 weeks later, I was thinking about this comment because again, the advent of it has been sort of escaping me. And I've been wondering to myself, how did this happen? And where is the end in sight for this? And so I started thinking about Ronnie and I started thinking about Kith. And I had this whole episode that I was going to do and talk about Ronnie. I was going to talk about the history. I was going to talk about his impact. And we can always do that. The home base of this podcast is always talking about the history, making sure that we remember certain things. I remember Greg from Sneak Diss said that once, that I sometimes remind people of something that maybe they have forgotten. They know it, but they just have forgotten it. And then I started thinking even more. And I started thinking about the people. Because I told you long ago, when I came back to this podcast, I wanted to focus on the culture. I wanted to focus on the people. And then I looked around. I was sitting at a red light and I looked and I saw young people and I looked down at their feet and I realized that they didn't have anything that I would recognize on. And so I went to where I needed to go and I started looking at all the young people and I started looking down, as I do a lot. And I realized I may have misread the entire demographic of the culture. And so I asked at the top of the show, who are sneakers for? And I want to kind of dive into that question in a way that's introspective, that maybe you who's listening right now can provide some insight to yourself and maybe even to me. And if you want to get in touch with me with some of that insight, of course, you can reach out, Instagram at Fire Footwear Pod. You can find me on YouTube, Fire Footwear Sneakers Talk, subscribe, all of that stuff. Reach out wherever is applicable, send a comment, and I'd love to hear from you. So let's think about the culture for a minute, and let's think about the idea of the culture. I think when I curate episodes for this show, and that's another thing that we should get into, is that content creation is difficult. I say that a lot here. I haven't said it in a while, and I don't say it as a means to complain. But as it relates to this episode, the reason that I say it is because one of the most difficult things about being an independent creator is coming up with topics. Topics that are interesting to me, topics that are interesting to you, and most importantly, topics that you actually give a damn hearing my voice about. That's really, really difficult. We, and I say we because it's true, have built a community around this content. Sure, it's not a big community, but it's a community nonetheless. And it's something that I'm very proud of. And how have I done that? I've done that by coming up with content, topics, and words around these topics that matter to you. Obviously, they matter to me because my words, my name, my likeness is on this podcast, but they matter to you because you keep coming back and listening. And so when I think about the people in this culture, you and everybody else who lives this culture is a part of that. Whenever I do an episode and I talk about, I guess, the demographics of sneaker culture, full disclosure, I am sort of a demographer in my regular job. At least I have been in the past. And so thinking about the makeup of certain groups of people interests me. Whenever we talk about different groups of people in this culture, I always use the term young people. And I think in my mind, it is defined. It's clearly defined in my mind. But when I sat down today to try and just sketch a few things about this episode, I realized that it's not clearly defined. I realized that it is sort of a rolling list of criteria, meaning I've never really actually defined it. And I started thinking about it because a lot of times when I talk about something historical or some retro and how young people don't appreciate it, I think I'm misrepresenting that in a way that's not helpful. Certainly not toxic, but it's not helpful. I think young people today, if I'm going to clearly define it, I think of young people as people right now who are in high school. And yes, somebody in their 20s is young comparative to me, but think about high school and think about sneakers in general. Sneakers and sneaker collecting, sneaker wearing, the hype around sneakers. Why do we do it? Think about it. Why do we do it? We do it, obviously, because we love the chase, because we love the sneakers themselves, of course. But I think really what we love is that in this small niche community, we are seen as having something that matters to the people that we feel matter. So let's take just even an Instagram post about something that you copped, something that you're wearing, and people like it. They say, that's fire. It's a fire fit, fam. And that's the kind of stuff that gets us off, right? That's the kind of stuff that we love. Do people in high school care about that? Yes. Appearances, hype, trends, popularity, attention, those things matter to younger people. Maybe they don't matter the same way that they did, or the same things don't matter to them as they did to me when I was in high school. But don't get them mixed up. They do care about that stuff. And again, sneakers represent something like this. So now take a concept that I just described to you and how and why we love sneakers, and now apply it to young people for whom fitting in matters so much. Why are they wearing runners? They're wearing runners because runners are trendy. And when you wear something trendy, you now become part of this flock. You become part of this group. You're accepted into this collective. People like me, 42 years old and older, sneaker culture and sneakers means something different. It's totally different. And that's healthy. And then there's this group in between. People in their 20s. I think about people in college right now. What do they care about? Independence. That's what they care about. Does it really matter in college whether you're wearing Jordans, Dunks, On Clouds? I don't know. I don't think so. I never got asked what I was wearing. Now, again, I wasn't in the culture back then, but I still think that in college, you're towing the line between being an adolescent and being an adult. And for those of you who didn't go to college, there's plenty of them. Those people are thrust right into adulthood. And again, sneakers, I think, is a grounding factor when life becomes difficult very early and very quickly. And so having those sneakers, depending on where you live, the socioeconomic background of your family, and all that good stuff, a lot of times sneakers mean something because somebody feels better having them. Somebody feels better when somebody is recognizing something they have. Just depends on a lot of factors, but you get what I mean. And then there's people who are, like, let's say 10 years younger than me, who maybe didn't see Michael Jordan play or remember him very vaguely. And so they have some memories because they're on the cusp of being a part of it. But do you see what I mean as I talk through these things? I think that sneaker culture, much like East Coast bias is talked about in sports, I think Jordan bias exists in sneaker culture because people like me and up who watched Michael Jordan play, who have visceral memories of Michael Jordan playing, we look at Air Jordans as what really makes up the culture. And sure, Jordans matter in the culture still. But I think every day that goes by, they matter less and less, at least in the way that we think that they matter. Because now you're seeing an evolution. You're seeing different sneakers, different types of designers coming up behind that and making their own stamp. There's so many of them. I could list a bunch, but think about J Tips. Think about Joe Freshgoods, Action Bronson now. So many things. So many people that are trying to do something different. And I look at this and I think, well, young people, they should appreciate Jordans. They should want to understand why it's important. Folks, we are 20-something years removed from Michael Jordan stepping on an NBA basketball court. Does he matter anymore? I did an episode of this show talking about, do we need to move on from Michael? And I think sneaker culture, when you talk about the actual culture, that's different. Sneakers as a commodity matter to young people because they are trendy. They matter to people en masse because they have a utility to them. People buy shoes that they like, obviously, but they buy them to wear them. They wear them for a certain occasion. They wear them for a certain activity, whatever. But that's why they buy them. And then when you think about the culture, sneakers are just the gateway to that. And within that culture, we look at these commodities so differently. And I wonder if maybe those of us who are in the culture, and that's all of you, that's all the people that aren't listening to this show, who feel the same way that I do, who feel the same way that you do about sneakers, I think we have sort of tricked ourselves maybe into thinking that sneakers should matter the same way to everybody. Maybe that's a personal fault of my own. Maybe that's not something you've experienced in this culture. Perhaps that's true. But I know when I think about it now, I think about the fact that sneakers is all-encompassing. That when I say there is something for everybody in this culture, I should mean it. I should actually believe it. And to an extent I do, but also when I think about the demographics and I think about who I internally have defined who sneaker culture is for, I think I've made a misstep in thinking that everybody has to live the culture the same way that we do. The culture is a great thing. The culture is special. Being part of this culture, the hustle that goes along with it, the chase, the camaraderie, all that's important. All that matters. And I honestly believe that the culture will always have a place. It's just going to evolve. And I think the way we bridge that gap, the way we get to younger people looking at shoes and connecting them with an actual culture, not just with a trend of the day, that's on us. That's on the people that are my age and older, maybe even a little bit younger than me. Those of us who watched Michael play, those of us who have these moments in time that we think about when we see a shoe. And I think that's important. And I think when we start to define who the culture is for, I think we need to open the doors a little bit wider, accept a few more people in. Because I think that if we don't, we are going to end up where I am right now. As I was thinking about this episode, and I have made a miscalculation. I have not accepted enough people into my definition, which to my own admission, I've not clearly defined anyway, of what sneaker culture is. The culture will evolve. The culture should change. I think we, you listening right now, need to help be that change. And so I ask you again to bookend this episode. Who are sneakers for? I'd love to hear from you. Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. If you're listening right now in podcasts, like, subscribe, rate, review, whatever is applicable. I love doing this content. I love doing it for you. I love doing it for new people, old people, young people. I do this for the culture. Hope this finds everybody well. I hope this finds everybody safe. And I will talk to you next time, fam. This is Fire Footwear.
The opinions and viewpoints expressed on Fire Footwear are those of Matt Frates and his guests, and not necessarily those of the Matty Ice Media Network. Fire Footwear is exclusively owned by Matt Frates and is brought to you by the Matty Ice Media Network.